one world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. Today is May 11th, 2012. Another Friday edition. And you know, on Fridays, sometimes I normally I play things that blow people's minds, but on Fridays, I like to go deep sometimes. I like to try to take you down the rabbit hole and show you subjects that will probably rattle you to the core. I mean, I do that pretty much all the time on my show, but you know what I mean. On Fridays, I like to delve deeper, we'll say. And tonight is no exception. And tonight I have a special program lined up for everybody. I've done this once before, where I'm going to play clips from the Winter Soldier Testimonies. Now, some of the clips I played before, there's only one or two clips I'm going to be playing again. The rest of these won't be the same ones I played the last time. And you're going to hear things that are going to blow your minds. A lot of the new listeners that have no idea what happened during war, never served, you're going to find out the reality of things, why veterans always say war is never good, especially combat vets. And you're going to hear things that the mainstream media chooses to ignore, cover up, lie about. Now, just because some of the things that you're going to hear took place during the Bush administration, a lot of things, also you're going to hear these guys speaking, and it's a year into the Obama administration or a year and a half into it, and they still haven't done anything. And you can see that from their point of view, they're going to tell you that they're the same guy. So this isn't Bush's fault, and Obama's going to fix it. He didn't fix anything the first 4 years. He's certainly not going to fix anything the next 4. He'll just make it worse. But tonight I want to play some more audio from the Winter Soldier Testimonies. And I like to give up the airtime to veterans that don't have a radio show, and I like to give it up to them and try to get their point of view across to people. Because the general public who does support war, even if people are weary of it, there's still people that support it. They have no idea what's going on. And even the ones that don't support it, most of them don't know the truth about what's going on. And the only way that we're going to be able to deal with anything is to be able to be exposed to the truth, deal with it, and move on. but you can't move on until you deal with the problem. And the truth is that, the truth of the matter, the things that did occur are part of the problem, and we need to deal with them. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to play the first clip from the IVAW hearings. And if I am correct, this is Brian Castler. Now, the audio, like I said the first time I played these, the audio on this, they used, I have no idea the quality of the mics. They look like regular, just studio mics. So I have no clue the quality of them, but there's a bit of a hum to it. So any of the hum you hear in the background that's from their audio. There's nothing I could do about it, but the things that they say in their testimony is definitely worth the listen. So here we go. Testimony from one of I think this one took place, if I remember correctly, this one took place in, I want to say 2009. And this is one of the ones that Dahlia Wasfi was at, by the way. You all know Dr. Dahlia Wasfi. She's been a guest on my show before. So here you go. Brian Castler.
My name's Brian Castler. I served 4 years with 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines Fox Company. We're an infantry unit. What I want to talk about is some of the smaller things that occurred very frequently throughout my 3 combat tours. These are the things that I left out to the letters home, and I rarely mention because it's not something I'm proud of. Whether I participated or I witnessed it, I never stopped it. When I first arrived at the fleet after completing infantry training, I checked into my unit and we had our first company formation. This is something that I didn't think about until I had made friends with a few people in the unit, but our first platoon was a segregated platoon, and nearly 90% of all minorities in the company had been moved to 1st Platoon, where white leaders were put in charge of those minorities as squad leaders and platoon sergeant. The real separation here is more than race. It's the dehumanization of individuals through devaluation of their worth. And in the Marine Corps, as an infantry unit, you separate yourself from everybody else by thinking of all other Marines as pogues, which are people other than grunts, and then yourself as infantry. And somehow you have more value than those other people. And this carries on to later stories. Just some common things that you'll face in your daily non-combat environment is if you're in an office and it's the morning and you're walking by maybe one of your staff sergeants and you say, "Good morning, Staff Sergeant." Well, I guess the common response in the civilian world would be like, "Oh, good morning to you too." But in the Marine Corps, you get kill babies. And that's motivating. That's not meant to be funny, or that's meant to motivate you and, start off your day with kill babies. And this isn't something that just happens once. The Marine Corps is filled with one-upsmanship to say the most dehumanizing, the most racist, the most offensive thing, and to enjoy it while you're doing it. During my first deployment, I was deployed to Kuwait in support of the invasion of Iraq. This was in 2003. Our unit was responsible for guarding General Tommy Franks. While staged in Kuwait, we received alerts for incoming missiles or possible gas attacks. Well, as a Marine, being with the general, you feel like you're going to get the most current information and you're going to be protected because you're going to be just up to date and around these other important people. Well, it was very disheartening to see the generals, Marines running out of their tents, putting on their gas mask. And then I look over to our commanders and I say, "Well, should we put on our gas mask?" They say, "Well, wait, the gas siren hasn't been sounded yet." And several minutes later, maybe 5-10 minutes, they would come running back out because they had forgotten to sound the siren for the rest of the base. So as Marines, we knew our place. We were at the bottom of the food chain. We were the ones that get forgotten about. Some of the other smaller things, once the invasion kicked off, we started crossing the border and moving into Iraq. And my experiences were mostly a positive reception by the Iraqi people. We were mostly vehicle mounted and pushing forward. And when we weren't vehicle mounted, we were in obscure bases that only a small amount of nomads would come by and interact with us. But while on these convoys, I saw Marines.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pause it right there, and we'll pick it up on the other side of the break, so don't go anywhere. More Winter Soldier Testimony when we get back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I'm going to go right back to Brian Castler and let him finish his testimony up. So here you go.
Other things I experienced was I was on post one day, and I noticed all these MREs, but they were slightly different. They were bigger, and they were yellow. I didn't know what these were, and we hadn't been receiving food at the rate that we were consuming it. So we were at a ration level, and these MREs were just sitting in the open. So I go over there, and I grab one, and I give a few to my buddies, and I start to wonder about what these are. And as I'm eating it, I start reading, and these are humanitarian MREs that the Marines were keeping to feed themselves instead of giving to the Iraqi people that they were supposed to be sent to. We didn't have a clearly defined mission except keep pushing forward. And when you don't have a clearly defined mission, that mission just becomes to come home alive, to survive. And Marines will have nothing more than to do one thing, and that's to one-up each other by using their training. And when you become stagnant and the mission becomes survival, Marines are going to use their training on Marines around them or on the civilian population. I saw this happen countless times, that our training for protesters, violent situations were used on unsuspecting civilians because there were no rules. And this was perpetrated by squad leaders and platoon sergeants. And if anyone's going to charge you with anything, it's going to be them. And if they're doing it, then you know you can get away with it. And it happens. It happened all the time. During my second combat deployment, I was deployed to the United States Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan from 2004 to 2005. This is not a normal role to guard an embassy as an infantry unit. This is usually carried out by Marine security guards, also known as MSG. At this point, I had been in the Marine Corps for a couple years, and it had become apparent that minorities in our unit, for whatever reasons they be, were not being promoted at the same rate as non-minorities. And the ones that did get promoted were exceptional. They would have been promoted no matter where they were because they went through meritorious boards. They were some of the brightest and best Marines I've ever worked with. However, while in Afghanistan, this was the point where we were told we were going to become leaders, that we were going to step up and start taking the leadership positions. Well, one of the first things we did as leaders is we had to go to a range, and to get to this range, we would drive in white vans. The area was not very unstable. These vans were not very secure vans. They were thin aluminum walls, and it was not meant to protect us. But the point of the matter is that we would be unsupervised because we were the leadership. We were supposed to be the supervision. Well, this was more viewed as a time to have some fun with our unsupervision and, do what boys do. So people who didn't even have licenses back in the States or know how to drive stick were now driving these vans through the crowded downtown streets of Kabul, Afghanistan at extremely high speeds, at the fastest the vehicles would go, driving in oncoming traffic, driving between the two lanes, pushing vehicles out of the way. And on one occasion, a man was killed for coming through an intersection at speeding vehicles. He was hit by the vehicle. He was not shot. Our vehicle hit this man, and we kept driving. I do not know if his family received any reparations or any repayment from the U.S. government. At another time, one of the drivers without a license, while going through one of the main circles in the city, hit a man and his donkey on a cart. And, you know, we talk about it here. You take away something as simple as one vehicle or your donkey, that's an entire family's livelihood. And that family could have been ruined by this small one incident. Finally, I'd like to talk about my third deployment, and that's to Iraq. Again, in 2005 to 2006, we were stationed in downtown Fallujah at the mayor's compound. Talking again about devaluation of Marines around you, we were told we would be receiving one SAPI plate. That was because the Marine Corps couldn't afford back SAPIs. So it was my job to issue out these SAPIs, and every day people would ask me, where are the back SAPIs? And I would have to look them in the face and say that, well, the Marine Corps says we don't have enough money for back SAPI plates right now. Another incident I saw in just the devaluation of life of other Marines was one Marine didn't have a gas mask the entire deployment. The rest of the company did, but this one Marine did not. And he repeatedly requested for a gas mask, and his requests were just ignored and pushed off to the side because the command did not like him. Now, I'm not saying there were chemical threats. I didn't experience any myself, but when the other 100-plus Marines are walking around 24/7 going to the bathroom with their gas mask, you kind of want one yourself. Just another little devaluation was the importance of documents in the mayor's compound to the Iraqi people. We had a couple of Marines that were being punished, and one of their punishments was to remove all this paperwork from the top floor of the mayor's compound and bring it down into our dumpsters while in full gear. This took hours for them to do, and I think it might have spanned it across days, actually. Well, after all the paperwork was gone, I finally had a chance to sit down with my interpreter and just ask, what was all that paperwork? Well, come to find out, we destroyed all the birth certificates of the city of Fallujah. I'd also like to talk about an important story a lot of my fellow IVAW members around me shared, and that was the realization, a moment where you realized you were only affected by American casualties and not Iraqi casualties. And one of the roles I filled was basically a 911 service. I was on an ambulance that would rush to pick up wounded in the city, and we were told that there were Iraqi wounded, possibly they were the police or the Iraqi military training. Well, I was all excited because it's a very exciting time. I mean, you talk to anybody that works on an ambulance or is an EMT, your adrenaline gets going, and we're rushing out there, and our vehicle's slowing down, and we're pulling up, and there's a mass of people around a bloodied area and a blown-up vehicle. And as we are slowly pulling forward to get into position, I see some desert boots, and then I see some digital desert camouflage, and I'm like, I didn't know that the Iraqi military had this. And then we pulled farther forward, and I realized that it was just another Marine that had been wounded. He wasn't part of our unit. He was just on a convoy going through the city. But this was the first time that I was affected in such a way that I was excited about what we were doing, and then a second later I was terrified, and it was only because that was an American wounded and not an Iraqi wounded. I'd like to sum up what all my statements have to do with, and that's an undefined mission and a lack of positive peer pressure. Negative peer pressure is rampant in the Marine Corps.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break. We get back more testimony from the different Winter Soldier hearings. Do not go anywhere. We owe these men, women, at least that. And we owe the people of Iraq at least that. So stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and now I want to go to a different clip, another Winter Soldier clip. This one was taking place at the Winter Soldier hearings in Colorado Springs a couple years back, and they're talking about the dehumanization, and I've talked about that before, how the forces are taught dehumanization of the people, the country that you're occupying, so it's easier to do your job. And I've gone into that in detail, but again, I want to give the floor to these guys. So here, I'm going to play this clip, and you're going to hear some hard. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the stuff you're going to hear tonight, as it progresses, you are going to hear sometimes you're going to hear really horrible things. So I just want to give you a heads up. So be prepared. And once in a while, you'll hear a cuss word. These guys are combat vets. And I think censoring them would not do their stories justice. So here we go.
Yeah, when one time our patrol, many a times we would swerve to actually try to hit people or kids. And one of our drivers missed, and he opened his door. And he hit this child with his door. And these doors are plated with a lot of armor. They're really heavy. Just to pick up the door by itself, it almost takes 2 men to do it, to put the door onto the hinge. And these doors are just really heavy. And a moving vehicle opening his door and swinging it out and hitting this kid, I'm sure the kid must have died. Mm-hmm. And I was in the truck. I was on the gun in the truck behind the truck that did it. And we finally pulled up to the base that we were headed to. We were on an escort mission. And, the TC came around and was screaming and yelling at the kid that did it. And I was like, thank God, something is being done. And, the kid was left alone, and he's pissed off that he got yelled at. And, I was asked him about it, and he said that he got in trouble because he endangered himself and his crew by opening the door. There could have been a possible IED. And it was at a time where we had to start rolling up our windows and make sure our windows were up, because the windows were bulletproof and blast-proof from IEDs. We couldn't ride with our windows down, even though it was 140 degrees out. And it was just sad to see that was the reason why this soldier was getting in trouble. And we set up these Geneva Conventions and these rules of engagement, but really it's just a liability. The truth is, once you're on the ground, there's an unspoken rules of engagement, unspoken Geneva Conventions that we start to abide by. And we stick to the book, and that we say that we're following the book. But you're with all these guys, and something might happen, and, it's very difficult to blame the soldier that's to the left of you after he does this atrocity, because you're all there. You're all dealing with this crap. And, fundamentally, it's not this kid's fault that he's there and doing these horrible things. You know that it's the policy and the fact that you're there all together that's what's wrong with this thing. And you wish you could take all of you and, take them back home, but you're just stuck there. And, I remember this one time we were at JCC, is a Joint Command Center. It's kind of where they put all the mayor's office and the courthouse and the police station, all kind of in this one conglomerated area that's easily defended by the Iraqi army. We always used to go up there and check on things, or we used to pull in there to rest because it's semi-secure. And on one end at the JCC in Khalees, one of the little towns that we used to always go through, there was an elementary school. And the elementary school was completely overcrowded. Almost all the kids just played soccer all day in the field. And it was like 50 against 60, in this little dirt soccer field with cut off palm trees as the goalposts. And they used to let the kids go through the JCC to get to school because they thought it was safer than them going around on the outside. And there was some Christian organization that gave this entire town, all the kids, backpacks. So they had these stupid squarish blue backpacks that no American kid would have the courage to wear. But every single Iraqi kid had these backpacks. And I used to actually inspect some of their school books and look at them. And some of them didn't have school books. I asked them why, and they said their father burnt them for fire or for heat or for cooking or whatever, or they just didn't have them. And we used to look at the pictures or whatever and talk about it, and I just try to engage the kids. And one day I was on the other side of the JCC, and the kids were coming through. I remember feeling kind of sad that I didn't get to interact with the kids that day because I was on their side on guard. and one of the kids exploded. I guess somebody put a bomb in one of these squarish black packs, and they detonated the kid when he got up to our Humvees, and everybody hit the ground, and you know, the kids scattered. I think five of the little kids were killed in the blast, and just one of our soldiers were injured. And I ran up to the Humvee, and I was just on the other side of the Humvee that got hit, and I ran up to it, and one of the kids' arms was on the opposite side of the Humvee. It must have just blown over the Humvee and landed. And I don't know why. I must have felt a little guilty about it, or just something was going through my mind, and I kicked it under the Humvee just to kind of get rid of it. Maybe I didn't want anybody else to see it. And I kicked it underneath the Humvee when I got there. And I was checking out our guys, and then we started doing triage on the little kids, and the medics finally came in, and I kind of backed up. And it took almost hours to just clean all this crap up. And, you know, a lot of the guys were just laughing about it, about the way the kids blew up. And I mean, you just learn to laugh at some horrible stuff when you're at war. It must be just a psychological way of dealing with something so horrific that you learn to laugh at it. But they cleaned all this up. They got the bodies gone and put them in bags and stuff. And after they left, it was about 15 minutes later, I remembered the arm underneath the Humvee. And I was like, oh, shit. You know, they just took these kids away, and they cleaned it all up, and this arm was still there. And I looked under, and I got the arm out, and I showed it to my sergeant. And he pointed over at the trash pile. And I was like, I'm not going to throw this kid's arm away. We should figure out who it belongs to. And the guy took the arm, walked it over to the trash pile, threw it on the trash pile. And, you know, that was that. So, you know, it's just a very skewed environment. People, you know, you just lose your mind. You don't know how to deal with things properly. And I've been in firefights where after it was over, you know, most of the firefights I've been in, you know, I was a sniper, but I did a lot of scout missions, so I was a gunner on a Humvee a lot of times. And usually we'd see a muzzle flash off in the distance. We didn't even see anybody. It was usually night, and we'd just see the muzzle flash and maybe some pinks on our Humvees if they were lucky enough to even get close. And we would just stop the trucks. We'd have 4 Humvees, which was pretty much a minimum of what you can drive out with. On top of each Humvee is a heavy automatic weapon, Mark 19 possibly, which is a fully automatic belt-fed grenade launcher where you hold down the butterfly and grenades shoot out the other end at an effective range of 2,000 meters. 50 caliber machine gun where the bullets leave the barrel and they actually swell to the size of salt shakers. And, you know, 240 Bravos that are one of the most rapid firing machine guns we have in the military, all trained on wherever this muzzle flash was coming from and just shooting and engaging. And a lot of times these guys would just fire off a couple shots, get down and run. Before we even stopped, the guy's gone. And he must have hit her behind, you know, usually a house that didn't belong to him. And we just lit up the entire house and just destroyed the house. And we kick off on, you know, after all the firing was done, you know, we kick off on little missions and just kind of raid the house. We kick in the front door, look through the area, just turn the place over. Usually we found innocent people inside, you know, mom and dad dead, little Johnny, little Mary dead, you know, and there's nothing you really do about it. You know, it's all collateral damage in the scheme of things. But that's kind of shit that sticks with you. And you go through that, and I see guys laughing, I see guys crying, I see guys praying, I see guys cursing, you know, all have experienced the same exact thing, you know, but everybody's kind of reacting different to it. So it's just kind of a jumbled mess, and it's chaotic. And it's not like the movies where everybody's moving in an organized way. Most of our combats were, you know, where we were in firefights was basically we were all just shitting ourselves. And our training and our love for the men that we're fighting with is the only thing that keeps us in check from just turning around and running and just leaving it all behind. And you try to squeeze yourself into, you know, hiding behind a signpost that you know you can't hide behind, but you're trying, you know, you're trying the best you can. And it's just a scary and chaotic mess. And the rules of engagement, they go out the window. Geneva Conventions, they go out the window. If I could drop a nuclear missile on some of these towns when I was in a firefight, just of pure fear of what was going on, I would have done it just to end it all right there. And these commanders that have these weapons available, like white phosphorus and MK-77, which is the modern day napalm, you know, they use them because they're responsible for getting these kids home alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break. Stay tuned. More Winter Soldier when we get back.
On April 18th, 2006, I had my first confirmed kill. This man was innocent. I don't know his name. I called him the Fat Man. He was walking back to his house, and I shot him in front of his friend and his father. The first round didn't kill him after I had hit him up here in his neck area. And afterwards, he started screaming and looked right into my eyes. So I looked at my friend who I was on post with, and I said, well, I can't let that happen. So I took another shot and took him out. He was then carried away by the rest of his family. It took 7 people to carry his body away. We were all congratulated after we had our first kills, and that happened to have been mine. My company commander personally congratulated me, as he did everyone else in our company. This is the same individual who had stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq. There was one incident where we got into a firefight just south of the government center, about 2,000 meters. We had no idea where the fire was coming from, and the way our rules of engagement were, pinpoint where the fire is coming from and throw a rocket at it. So with that being said, we still didn't know where the fire was coming from, and an 84 millimeter rocket was shot into a house. I do not know if there was anyone in it. We do not know if that's where the fire was coming from, but that's what was done. Please go to the next image. This man right here was my 3rd confirmed kill. As you can see, he was riding his bicycle. Later on in the day, we went ahead and we had CBS Laura Logan with us, but she was with the other squad. And so she wasn't with us. So myself and 2 other people went ahead and took out some individuals because we were excited about the firefight we had just gotten into, and we didn't have a cameraman or woman with us. With that being said, anytime we did have embedded reporters with us, our actions would change drastically. We never acted the same. We were always on key with everything, did everything by the books. The man on the bicycle, he was left in the street for about 10 minutes until we realized that we needed to leave where we were. And his body was dragged about 10 feet to the right of him, where his body was thrown behind a rock wall, and his bicycle was thrown on top of him. Another thing that we used to do a lot was recon by fire, where we would go ahead and try to start a firefight if we felt threatened in any way, shape, or form. There's one particular incident where we were working with the Iraqi Army and the Iraqi Special Forces in downtown Ramadi, and with our squad and the Iraqi Army, there was also lieutenant colonels, majors, first sergeants, and sergeant majors. Sergeants major. With that being said, the Iraqi Army would go into the house, kick in the doors, and then go ahead and shoot. And there were loud bursts of machine gun fire. We thought we were taking fire, but then we later found out that it was them. House raids. Because we were a grunt battalion, we were responsible for going on several patrols. A lot of the raids and patrols we did were at the night, around 3 o'clock in the morning, around there. And what we would do is just kick in the doors and terrorize the families. That was an image taken around 3 o'clock in the morning through night vision goggles. And that is the segregation of the women and children and the men. If the men of the household were giving us problems, we'd go ahead and take care of them any way we felt necessary, whether it be choking them or slamming their head against the walls. If you go back to that one picture, that was one man that wasn't taken, that was taken care of in a very bad way. because of all the wiring that he had. It would be considered an IED making material. On my wrist, there's Arabic for FU. I got that put on my wrist just 2 weeks before we went to Iraq because that was my choking hand. And anytime I felt the need to take out aggression, I would go ahead and use it. Please go to the next picture. Next. There's an instance of detainees and how they were treated in a nice manner. Next. That is the Fatima Mosque minaret. As you can see, it is written with bullet holes and holes in the top of it. Those were from mortars. And the next video that I'm going to show you is a tank round that went into that minaret, where we weren't sure if we were taking fire or not.
Which, by the way, I'll stop it there because he shows a couple, some video clips of some of the things of them shooting up the minaret and the mosque and stuff. But for those of you that don't know, shooting up a minaret that's attached to a mosque, okay, because that's what they are, shooting them up, that is, unless, you know, if you're not taking fire from it and you have to be confirmed because it's a place of worship, that's a war crime. That you're not supposed to do that. But a lot of the times, you know, and again, the guys at the lower end, they've explained a lot of this isn't just following orders. In some cases, it's them actually, you know, after watching their friends get killed and everything else, and if you're in a situation like that where it's just fire, you know, if you're fired upon, you return fire. You know, a lot of times, you know, it's just about getting home. But if you're not sure, everybody's pissed off, one of their guys got shot, they're not sure where they're taking fire from, and they just start shooting. You can't shoot up a minaret, you can't shoot up a mosque like that without being 100% sure. But again, fog of war. Point is, these young men and women shouldn't have been put in this position to begin with. Period. End of story. I'm going to play the testimony from Brandon Neely really quick before we go to break. And then I got some other stuff lined up on the other side of the break for hour 2. So here we go, really quick.
My name is Brandon Neely. I joined the Army in August of 2000 as a military police officer. I was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas for 5 years. I deployed 3 times, Egypt, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and Iraq. I've seen and done many horrible things in 2 of those 3 deployments. But I'm here to talk about my time at Guantanamo Bay inside Camp X-Ray. We were told these were the men that planned 9/11 and that would kill us at any time if given the chance. At no time were we given any Geneva Conventions training, and we were told on numerous occasions these world's most dangerous men did not fall underneath the Geneva Convention. When the detainees arrived, they had on orange suits, some had orange ski caps. They had goggles on their eyes, earmuffs on their ears, surgical masks on their face, and black gloves on their hands. They were handcuffed and leg shackled. They had chains around their waist with padlocks on their back. The handcuffs were attached to the waist chain. The first person who got off the bus I will never forget. It was a man with one leg. He was later nicknamed Stumpy by everyone in the camp. He was grabbed by the escorting MPs, and Stumpy was jumping on one leg. The MPs were screaming at him to walk faster towards the hold area. From inside the bus, one of the Marines threw his prosthetic leg out onto the ground. Next, it was me and my partner. We grabbed the second detainee that came off the bus. We grabbed him like we were trained and took him to the holding area, yelling and screaming at him the whole way to get on his knees and shut up. One by one, the detainees were taken from the holding area to the backside of the camp, where in process it happened very quickly. Earmuffs, goggles, masks were taken off, their pictures were taken, and ID bracelets were made and placed on their wrist. Then the goggles and the surgical masks were placed back on until they got to the cages. We would take them to their assigned blocks, walking at a very fast pace. If they couldn't keep up, we would walk faster. We would scream and carry them to their cages. We were told one would go to Alpha Block, one would go to Bravo Block as we were spreading them out. On the first day the detainees arriving, I personally was involved in the very first incident at Camp X-Ray. My escorting partner and myself grabbed the next detainee leaving the in-process center. He was an older man, probably in his mid to late 50s, short and kind of a husky build. I remember grabbing him and then starting to walk through the sally ports and through the rocks, heading towards the Alpha Blocks where he would be housed. Then I noticed he was really tense, shaking really bad and not wanting to walk or move without being forced to. We made our way onto the block and placed him in this cage. He went to his knees, which My partner then took off his leg shackles. I still had control of his upper body, and I could still feel him tensing up. Once the shackles were off, my partner started to take off the handcuffs. The detainee got really tense and started to pull away. We screamed at him, stop moving, and then so did the interpreter over and over. Then he suddenly stopped. And when my partner went back in to take the handcuffs off, he made a move to the left and jerked. Before I knew it, I had threw the detainee to the ground and was on top of him, holding his face to the cement floor. At this time, my partner had left me in the cage by myself. The block NCOIC was on the radio yelling a code red, which meant emergency on the block. Before I knew it, I was being grabbed from behind and pulled out by the cage by the earth team. They grabbed this man and hog-tied him. He lay there like that for many hours before he was released from that position. A couple days later, I found out from a detainee who was on the block that the older detainee was just scared and thought when we placed him on his knees that we were going to execute him. He then went on to tell me that this man had seen many of his family members and friends executed in this manner. I did not feel good about what I did. It felt wrong. This man was old enough to be my father, and I had just beaten him up.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why these young men and women come home and they're committing suicide at massive rates, or they're even doing it over there at bases, and now in Afghanistan. We owe them the respect to pay attention, and we owe the Iraqi people that we did this to, and we allowed this to happen to. Whether we were fooled or not, we owe them. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is May 11th, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com, and I want to get right back into it. Here is another piece of fresh testimony from the Winter Soldier hearings. I think this one goes back to 2009.
My name is Matt Childers, former corporal of the United States Marine Corps. I served 2 deployments to Iraq with 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, Charlie Company, 2nd Platoon. I was in the infantry. The first deployment started just before the initial invasion of Iraq in May of 2003 and lasted until September. The second deployment lasted from May 2004 until February 2005. There's a few instances I want to speak of regarding the dehumanization of the Iraqis. I have a few scenarios, but these things happened on an almost daily basis. Between April and August of 2003, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines was occupying a pistol factory in Al-Hila. And my platoon was tasked out with detainee watch along with some Marines from the regiment. These detainees, there's 3 of them, they were in our custody for about a week. Over this week, these guys were beaten relentlessly and humiliated, teased with food and water. They were begging the Marines for food and water, and the Marines would mock them, throw water in their face. The detainees were flexi-cuffed by their wrists behind their back, and they were blindfolded. The Marines were screaming at them to get up, and then they'd trip them down on their face. They couldn't break their fall because they were tied up. And the Marines were showing the Iraqis pornography, which is strictly taboo to their religion, and they made this very obvious to us. I saw a Marine take the hat off of an Iraqi. He shoved it down the back of his pants and wiped himself with it, and then tried to feed it to the Iraqi who was blindfolded. And because he was desperate for food, he actually tried to eat it. Another situation, well, let me get back to that. These guys were in our custody for about a week, and I didn't see them eat the whole time. I wasn't around them 24/7. I don't know how long the posts were, but I didn't see them eat or sleep at all. I remember the Marines taking this guy out to use the restroom, and I can't remember what the proper terminology is for the type of gown that they wear, that the men wear in Iraq. but because he was flexi-cuffed, he was trying to squat to use the bathroom to spread open his gown, and the Marine was kicking him in the ankles. I remember his ankles were bloody and shoving him over while he was trying to use the restroom, telling them that he should stand up and urinate like a man. Another instance is a separate EPW. I'm not sure what month this was. We were stationed at an oil refinery in Iraq. This was still during the first deployment. And I remember our squad had a detainee in the back of a 7-ton, and he was also flexi-cuffed, had a sandbag over his head, and he was beaten relentlessly, getting kicked in the face, boot laces to the face, their fingers smashed with our rifles and our boots. During both tours of Iraq, there was an obvious and intentional dehumanization of the Iraqis, especially during the first deployment. I don't know how many times I heard Iraqis refer to anything other than Hajis. And this term was used by the entire chain of command and was used with our training. And I think the use of the terminology proved effective in dehumanizing them, because we were just so disrespectful. If just patrolling down the streets, if anyone got too close to our formation, we would use that as an excuse to mess them up. The logic behind this was possibly, he could be carrying a bomb, which has happened in the past, but anyone who turned the corner and ended up within our reach suffered consequences. During both tours of Iraq, it seemed like we raided countless residences. I couldn't even begin to give you a figure. Most of the time, we'd show up like 3 o'clock in the morning, early hours of the morning, bust in the house, raid the house, systematically clear every room, pointing semi-automatic and automatic weapons in their faces and screaming at them in a language that they don't understand. I don't know where the intelligence was coming from for this stuff, but we barely ever found anything in these houses. A lot of times they're just homes of families, and we throw everyone out on the front, out of their own homes in the front yard. This happened countless times. If we did find anything, we may find an AK-47, which before the American occupation was legal for them to have. Their weapon laws are obviously very different. I remember one raid that we did on a house, and there was an elderly man laying on the floor, and our squad leader was yelling at us to get this man up, and we were screaming at this man, and he's obviously very old and ill, and the Marines began kicking the man. During EPW searches, or not EPW searches, but searching the people that were taken out of their homes, a lot of times the Marines were very rough with them, would hit them in the genitals or poke them with the muzzle of the rifle. Last thing I want to say, last point. This was also at the pistol factory in the first deployment in Al-Hila. I was on the front entry checkpoint to the forward operating base, and with a fellow Marine, and we were having a conversation. We weren't really paying attention that well, and then we looked in front of us, and there was a man like 15 feet away carrying a baby, and all the baby's skin was burned off. And he was very upset, and he was wanting medical help, and he was saying that the explosion was a result of our ammunition somehow. He barely spoke English, and we didn't speak any Arabic, so we tried to call the corporal of the guard, who's in charge of all the people that are on post, and we told him our situation, and he told us to make the man and the baby leave. And we, I don't even think we did that right away. There was like the 10-minute period where we just kind of didn't know what to do. You know, it'd be really hard to tell this man to walk away. So we called the corporal of guard again in case he didn't understand the severity of the situation. And he told us to leave, and then he ended up actually coming out to help us escort this man away. I have no doubt in my mind that the baby's injuries were a result of coalition forces. Because, all of Iraq is riddled with unexpended ammunition, mortars, and bombs. Our own training tells us that they use this against us to make the roadside bombs. So.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, break coming up. Don't go anywhere. More Winter Soldier Testimonies when we come back. I know it's tough to hear, but the truth is the truth, and it needs to be told. We will be right back.
My name is Jeffrey Smith. I enlisted in the Army as an infantryman in September 1997. I served 3 years active duty in the 3rd Infantry Division and then enlisted for 6 further years in the Florida National Guard. I was a grenadier with Bravo Company, 2nd of the 124th Infantry, and was deployed to Camp Anaconda, Balad, Iraq, in early May 2003. I was honorably discharged in January 2004. I reside in Orlando, Florida, and was raised as a military brat. My father served 2 tours in Vietnam and is currently rated 100% disabled by the Veterans Administration due to PTSD and Agent Orange exposure. Upon deployment to Balad, my unit was primarily tasked with gate and perimeter security at Camp Anaconda, the largest of the enduring presence bases in Iraq. Providing security at the front gate, one of the daily rituals we were tasked with was clearing Iraqi nationals who came to work on a daily basis on post, doing such jobs as filling sandbags, clearing rubble and trash, etc. These Iraqi nationals were paid $1 a day and were given an MRE for lunch. They worked under extreme conditions of heat and dust, oftentimes 130-degree temperature, and were always escorted by armed guards. Every morning, the Iraqis that wanted to come on post to work were herded into a barbed wire enclosure, many times too small for their number. Pushing and shoving often started fairly early in the morning. You had several hundred men gathered together, and they would oftentimes start pushing the men in the front into the barbed wire. And in order to get them to stop doing that, we often used physical force. In fact, physical force was used almost on a daily basis. This included shoving, butt stroking the Iraqis who were in the front, threatening them with bayonets, and there were several occasions when we actually locked and loaded our weapons and told them that if they didn't stop shoving and pushing each other, that we were going to open fire. One of our other responsibilities at the front gate was to search the several hundred dump trucks and semi-trailers that were coming on post every day. The dump trucks were also driven by Iraqi nationals. We had 1 or 2 interpreters usually on duty with us, but inevitably there would be miscommunication. The Iraqis wouldn't understand what was happening. And on one day, apparently an Iraqi truck driver, a dump truck driver, didn't understand that he was supposed to stop and continued forward in his truck, and my team leader interpreted this as a hostile action, ran over, yanked him out of the truck. The rest of my team responded. We basically beat the crap out of this guy, pushed him down in the dirt, detained him, roughed him up, and told him that he was not allowed to come back on the post for at least a month. This was obviously his only livelihood, so I don't know what he did for the next month. There was another incident where an Iraqi dump truck driver was out of his truck, and apparently he got excited about something, and he started to run by me. I clotheslined this driver, knocked him to the ground, and then realized that he was running over to say something to his friend who was ahead in line in front of him. I was congratulated for this by the rest of my unit and was told that this was exactly the way we should behave, and we should carry out our duty at the gate. One of the other missions that we were occasionally tasked with was raiding houses in the local area, especially when we first arrived in country. One of the houses that we first raided was supposedly the home of a former Bath official. It was the middle of the day when we raided this house. When we arrived in the neighborhood, we were told that we were going to try to force the front gate open to the house. But apparently the armored cavalry unit that was with us had other plans in mind. They rolled over the front wall of the house, destroyed the vehicle that was inside, and upon entry to the house, I was second in the stack of formation of troops that went through the gate. There was an older female who was in the courtyard by this time, and she was screaming something unintelligible in Arabic. I didn't see her as a threat, so I continued on past her into the building itself. One of the soldiers behind me apparently thought that she was a threat, butt stroked her in the face, knocked her to the ground, and someone after him apparently zip-tied her and took her out into the front yard. Then we proceeded to ransack this house. I was in the master bedroom. There was dressers and wardrobes. Wardrobes were locked. We pulled the doors off. We turned everything in the room upside down. We went through everything. Personnel in my unit that were in the kitchen turned the refrigerator upside down. Pulled the stove, actually broke the stove, pulled it out of the wall, broke the line to it. After we searched through the house, we had everyone, including the children, zip-tied on the front lawn. Apparently, someone in my chain of command realized that we had the wrong home. We were on the wrong street, that the home we were supposed to have raided was actually behind this house on another street. So we went over to that home and raided that house. Actually, going through that gate of that home, I actually almost fired on a person that I believe was mentally disabled. He apparently didn't understand what was going on. He was standing in a window directly in front of us, and in the initial first few seconds of going through the wall, I actually thought that he was a threat. Almost fired, and then realized that there was something wrong with him and he just didn't realize what was happening. We searched through that home, detained the person that we were supposed to detain, and upon searching the home, we started coming across all this paperwork in his office and in his bedroom, and it looked to me like he was an algebra instructor. Maybe at the local high school, maybe at a local university, because there was just reams of stuff that was math problems. This guy is supposed to be a former Bath official. We took him, put a sandbag over his head, loaded him on a truck, and we started back towards Camp Anaconda. He was actually on my vehicle with my squad. And on the way back to Camp Anaconda, it was about a 45-minute drive. My squad leader thought that it would be funny to pose for a picture next to this guy, and he asked me to take a photo of him and this detainee, and I refused to do so. I didn't believe that was the right thing to do, and Upon arrival back at our quarters, I was disciplined for quite some time for this, including physical punishment, because I had disobeyed him in front of the rest of the squad.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going break. Stay tuned. We're back in a few minutes. More Winter Soldier Testimonies. Like I said, I know it's rough, but the truth needs to be told. Believe me, this is just the small tip of the iceberg. We'll be right back.
My name is Christopher Arendt, and I would like to share with you how one goes about becoming a concentration camp guard without ever having really made many decisions. I was 17 years old when I joined the United States Army National Guard in Michigan. My family had been displaced, and I was living with friends. And I decided to join the military because I had no other options. My family was poor, I was poor, and I wanted to go to school. I was promised a significant amount of money for this purpose, which I have yet to receive. And I joined the field artillery, Charlie 1st and the 119th Field Artillery, where I served quite happily for... No, that's a lie. I was miserable. I hated it. But I served nonetheless. I was usually at drill, and my uniform was usually, it was on. And it didn't really seem... I joined November 20th of 2001, which was after September 11th, though I lied about it later and said that I joined before September 11th. And we got the orders in October of 2003 that we would be deploying to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Artillerymen would be deploying to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba to be prison guards in a prison camp. In our mobilization process, which lasted the period of 1 month in Fort Dix, New Jersey, we were taught how to put shackles on other people. I remember it feels so ridiculous when you are practicing how to put shackles on another human being. You realize how absurd it is. You're putting them on somebody's hands, and it's just awkward. It's just an awkward thing, and it hurts. It's uncomfortable. It feels dehumanizing. This is just practice. This is just to warm up for the big game. And I just felt so silly, the whole thing. And we left for Guantanamo Bay early in January and got there safely. It was hot. It was uncomfortable. And we slept in these awful little houses, but at least we had houses. I mean, the rest of the testimonies you've heard here not had some of the luxuries that we were given in Guantanamo, but I served on the blocks for 2 months as a prison guard. My duties were to feed, properly dispense toilet paper, and occupy myself in some way, shape, or form to drive the boredom out. That was the primary difficulty in keeping my humanity in touch, was the boredom all of the time. One of the ways I dealt with this was talking with the detainees, because an unfortunate consequence of having detainees is that they are human beings and also have stories, and I talked with them about those stories, which became an incredibly unpopular event, or a series of events, which led to my being taken off the blocks to work in the Detention Operations Center as the escort control for the next 8 months of my tour. And during that time, I personally managed as an E4 the movements of every detainee in Camp Delta for 12 to 14-hour shifts, and rotated with a very small other crew of other E4s, 20, I was 19 at the time. And just papers, numbers, shackles, keys, all of it had to be accounted for, but it wasn't anything more than papers and shackles and numbers and keys. And I'd call to people, and usually outranking me, and I'd have to tell them to do something that they hated doing, and they hated me for telling them to do it. But that's the organization of the machine. It's just one ridiculous piece of meat in a Plinko machine of orders that come down from God knows who, knows where. It just keeps coming down, and it just keeps going through. There are two specific things I would like to address about the operation of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. One is the issue of torture. I've heard a lot of speculation as to what torture is considered. First and foremost, I would like to ask of everyone, well, I don't really expect an answer, but just for your own considerations, whether or not living inside of a cell for 5 years away from your family and your friends without ever being given any answers as to why you're there, asking 19-year-old boys that don't have any idea about the policy of our government and the politics that make these things happen, why they're there, and the answers that we weren't able to give. I consider that torture. But if that wasn't enough, there were other methods as well to make certain that we got around to torturing these people. As I said earlier, I dispatched the detainee movements. I would come into the office at 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes there would be a little paper in the wall with a number on it, which represented a detainee, inside of an interrogation room. An interrogation room which was anywhere from maybe 10, 20 degrees in temperature, with loud music playing, and that detainee had been there for an indeterminate amount of time, and sometimes that detainee would stay there for my entire 12 to 14-hour shifts, shackled to the floor by his hands and his feet, with nothing to sit on, with loud music playing in the freezing cold. And I guess that's torture too. It depends on who you ask. I hear that there's an official list of things that are and are not torture. Waterboarding is. This is not. My recent example is not torture. I can't believe that a human being could even write a list like that, but the other issue I would like to address is the common usage of the instantaneous reactionary force, which is a 5-man team established on the day. Every day it's a rotating force. Whoever's in the camp at that time they make the teams in the morning. And if by any chance a detainee is unsatisfied with his stay and becomes rowdy, 5 grown men who have all been eating well, which is a privilege that these detainees are usually not allowed, are fitted with riot gear and a shield and are lined up outside of a cell while the platoon leader of that particular camp sprays the detainee in the face with OC spray. I don't know who in here has been sprayed with OC spray, but I'm positive that anybody that has would never want it to happen again. I had it happen to me, and I certainly feel as that's probably one of the worst moments in my life. It was an incredibly, intensely painful experience, and I would never, ever want anyone to have this happen again. Have this happen to them, I'm sorry. And after spraying the detainee with this, which put me on my knees for probably 2 to 3 hours afterwards, and in a great deal of pain for the next 3 days because it's oil-based and it's incredibly painful, these 5 men would rush in and take whatever opportunities they could to, usually, though it's not, I have to state, because they did make a book about it, it's called the SOP, and it does not state that you should beat the S word out of detainees, but I guess that some people just decided that that's what they were going to do anyway. These are all on tape, by the way. The government makes sure that each one of these operations is taped. I taped several of them, and I would be so happy to be able to show you those clips, but I doubt that those will be released anytime soon. After the detainee is taken forcibly from his cell, that's probably the first time that he's left his cell in 5.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the final break. You can go get the book, the Winter Soldier Testimonies. They have some DVDs, some other books written by these guys over there. IVAW.org. 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 We'll be right back.
During my time in Iraq, we came to a small town. I was in the infantry. I was in Sadr City. And we were supposed to clear these individuals' buildings, looking for caches of weapons. We came to one house, kicked in the door. There was a family. We detained them. They took the man to search for weapons. They found an AK, legal, and they zip cuffed him for security purposes. Sent me and another guy outside to keep an eye on the detainees. They brought us one AK-47, a magazine, and an unserviceable rusty revolver. While I sat there, I watched as this old woman with an infant in her arms fell to the ground in a weeping mass of inconsolable sorrow while they listened to 2 gunshots. The 2 gunshots that passed through the face of an innocent man. Her children sat at her side and tried to console her. No, Americans couldn't do that. No, they have our best interests in mind. Unfortunately, it wasn't true. Her screams are in my dreams. A couple of weeks later, we were ordered to fire on a dump truck. We opened fire. 5.56, 7.62, 25 millimeter. And while the truck burned to the ground, a man ran to the base of our rooftop OP waving a white cloth and yelling, "Baby, baby," trying to tell us that we were destroying nothing more than children and garbage. A truck full of children and garbage. So we killed him. The next day, I had to move the body with another individual. The entire time, he kicked bricks at him, spit on the body, cursed him, and when I confronted him, he said he deserved it. He would have done the same to us. Even had he been guilty, the wages of sin are death, at least in my mind. Now, ever since World War II, maybe before, there have been organizations like ours that come forth and stand against the aggressions of Americans on foreign soil. And each time they've watched sorrowfully as their attempts failed. Now it's our time. Obama claims that he wants to withdraw the troops from Iraq. At least he did prior to gaining the presidency. All the while saying that Iran is a constant threat, allowing troops to be increased in Afghanistan, turning his sights on Russia, claiming that they would deliver nukes to the terrorists. And now he's confronting China for currency manipulation and monetary policy. He's calling for a civilian security force and mandatory service. And we cannot allow a blind eye to be turned on these things. Obama is no friend of the veteran. We call for a full withdrawal of all troops from all around the world, not just from Iraq. People often forget that a nation's governing body governs only by the will of the people. If the people so choose, changes can be made. But first, a revolution of consciousness and action is necessary. The government is supposed to be by the people, for the people, and of the people, not by the bourgeoisie, for the rich and of the powerful. The federal government has lost control and is on a conquest, and it is time to command our representatives, not our leaders, for they only represent the people, to respect the wishes of the people, withdraw from aggressions, and repair what we have injured, or be expelled from their lofty positions by those who they represent, us, the people. We have the power, and we can no longer allow these inhumanities to progress. Today is the only day for action. The world is in flames, and we hope for someone else to step forward and smother them. A messianic politician who will make things all right for us. I've heard too many Americans say that no one person can make a difference of any value, never understanding that each action causes an equal or greater reaction. Each who stands inspires 5 to stand with them, and those 5 will inspire 5-fold the same. May this be the day we wake and reclaim our lives. May this be the day that the propagandist media withers and dies, and the people ask their own questions. For we are the many, and the powerful are the few. This is our time. Right.
Well said, friend, well said, and that is why I ended with that clip. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important to understand that these stories are real. I love when I get haters when I play the stuff about this, and I get haters telling me, oh, you're a liar, that's not real, there's no way, my brother served with honor, my cousin, my uncle, I was there. Well, maybe they didn't partake in it, maybe they just didn't tell you. You ever think that maybe your brother, your cousin, your uncle, whoever, maybe they just didn't tell you what they experienced because they locked it away, because they don't want to, it's so horrific they don't even want to think about it. And when you're in a war zone like that, you don't play ball, you'll get sent on a mission where they know you're going to get killed. Trust me. They will know you're going to get killed. I've played the testimonies before. Look at John Needham's testimony. They tried killing him, and I think it was a lieutenant. Both of them had seen stuff, and neither of them had partaken in any of the atrocities, so they had set it up so there was an ambush. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So to try to judge someone and say, well, you know, my cousin didn't tell me this, so I don't believe that the stories that you're playing are real, Popeye. That's ignorant. That's highly ignorant. Perhaps they just haven't told you. Remember, that fear is still there. It's compartmentalized. It's put away. They don't want to even access that memory because that fear of the reprisal of what could happen, even if they're out. And maybe the memory is just too horrible to bear. That's why a lot of these people, and a lot of the soldiers, whether they be men or women, they commit suicide. Obviously more men than women, but that commit suicide. The women, a lot of times it's due to, it's related to sexual assaults more, which if I had time, I'd play, I could do another whole hour and I could play stuff about that. But I've played clips about the military rape problem before. It's an epidemic that you are all well aware of. And it's because the military is being dehumanized. And that's because after World War II, they realized, I think it was 1 in 10 guys didn't shoot their weapon, something like that. They wouldn't kill, they wouldn't shoot to kill, or they wouldn't kill, period. So after that, the training became more intense and more focused on the dehumanization, because if you dehumanize your enemy, then it's like playing a video game. And the problem is, the military is being taught to lose its humanity, to turn that switch off. And, I mean, in a lot of cases, some people that join, look, not everybody that joins is an angel. I was in, I know. But as I would say 90%, 95%, of the people that do bad crap aren't even really bad people. That's why people get so defensive of them and emotional about them. They're good people. You don't understand. You don't understand what he went through. And they are right in that defense. You don't understand the bigger picture. You don't understand what they were put, the situation they were put in. And I'm not by any means justifying it. But once you try to put yourself in their shoes and you understand what they went through, you have to understand the training. It's systemic. It's the whole military is like that. So it's not the attacking the soldier or the Marine or the airman or the sailor would be stupid, because yes, they are responsible for their own actions, but at the same time, it is not just them. And blaming a single person, which is what the military does. Well, it was a rogue Marine, or it was a rogue sailor, or a rogue airman, or a rogue soldier. No, it's a problem throughout the entire 5 branches, and it's because it's condoned. This dehumanization is condoned, and I've said it a bazillion times. When you embrace the dark side, it just permeates your entire soul. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time for tonight. You can go check out more stuff about the IVAW and the Winter Soldier Testimonies, IVAW.org. Go to their store. I have a copy of the Winter Soldier book myself. You'll read some of the testimonies that were played tonight, plus others. Thank you all for listening. As always, I love you all. No fear, only love. We'll get through this. It's rough, but we have to see the truth. We have to deal with it. I will catch you all on Sunday at 5, and make sure you stay tuned. Mae Brussel, a legend. She's coming up. Stay tuned.